Happy Friday, and thanks for tuning into RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host of Norm, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Bob Donaldson. Bob, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And holy crap, what an interesting life you've led. It's look at you, don't look so surprised. And I didn't know, so I researched you a little bit, and I heard a little bit about you from various people. But just now, you shared that you were in the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
That didn't show up anywhere online.
No, it's not a state secret, but I did serve in the Coast Guard Reserve from 1972 to 1977, and I used to be stationed up at Saugerties and different search and rescue stations around.
And how did that happen, that you came to join the Coast Guard?
I beat the draft. I got into the Coast Guard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that a way out of the draft? The Vietnam draft, you mean?
Yeah, but it was a one way of serving, so I figured it'd be nice to be able to be part of a military group. Actually, it's not part of the military.
Right.
The Coast Guard at the time was the part of the Department of Transportation.
Interesting. I didn't know that either.
So rather than getting in conflicts, I worked with saving people or cleaning up oil spills.
Right.
Yeah.
And 4 years as a full-time job?
I'm sorry.
In the Coast Guard? You served in the Coast Guard?
I did, but it was 6 months originally active duty, and then 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else were you doing during your service?
Well, I was a teacher. I started teaching here up in Rhinecliff back in 1972 at the Holy Cross School, the former Cardinal Farley Military Academy.
The Rhinecliff Free Union.
Rhinecliff Union Free School District,
which has nothing to do with unions.
No, it was just a separate school district, an autonomous school district within the Rhinebeck area. So we had nothing to do with the Rhinebeck school system, but we were a public school.
Right.
And the agency was run by the Archdiocese of New York.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so did you study teaching? Did you get a certificate somewhere? Or?
I got my certificate in teaching. I was a history major in college, and of course I had to go to grad school, and I received my master's in education, but with a minor in social studies history.
Okay. Yeah. Social studies history. I remember social studies. And so are you from around here?
No, originally from New York City, the Bronx.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so where'd you go to school down there?
I grew up in the Parkchester section of the Bronx, St. Raymond's Parish. That's how the Irish would always identify their neighborhood, by their parish. Went to Mount St. Michael High School, and then in 1967 came up to Marist College. It was an all-male school, sectarian. We wore tie and jackets to class.
Wow.
And no females on the campus. It was all male.
Wow. And why would a young man ever choose a college like that?
Well, Marist seemed to offer a nice program in history, and they also encouraged the students to enter teaching. And so I had experience with the Marist Brothers. They were excellent teachers, and so that's why I chose Marist.
Right.
And came up to the area and never went back to the Bronx.
Wow. And what kind of experience had you had with the Marist Brothers?
All in high school. In high school, the Marist Brothers were most of them were my teachers. Some late teachers, but most of them were Marist Brothers. And even at Marist College, some of the professors were still Marist Brothers. Although by 1970, Marist was non-sectarian. It was co-ed. And the brothers who were still teaching there were no longer Brother Damien. It was Mr. Damien. So,
right.
Yeah.
How very interesting. And so how did you like that? How did you like Marist?
Marist was a great school. Great people, great teachers. I enjoyed the experience, and it also introduced me to the Mid-Hudson area that I fell in love with, and decided to stay.
And was it a Catholic school?
At first, when I got there in 1967 to 1969, it was sectarian.
Right.
However, Marist went non-sectarian by 1969. So
you said that's
that's
amazing.
All of the religious statues or crucifixes that might have been in the classroom were all removed.
Wow, just like that.
Yeah.
And when you first came there, were there religious classes that you had to take?
I took a class in theology. I remember my teacher, Brother Michael Shirkus, and brilliant teacher. I mean, basically we studied the Old Testament,
Right.
and opened our eyes to all the different books of the Old Testament. And he was a great teacher.
Because as a young boy growing up, I'm guessing Catholic, it was predominantly New Testament stuff.
New Testament, yes. Yes, even in high school, it
Right.
was New Testament. Although by the 1960s, after the Vatican Council, some of the teachers were a little more rebellious, breaking away from the strict Catholic doctrine to a more liberal interpretation of the faith.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was an altar boy.
Yeah.
I learned all the Latin, which paid off when I was teaching. When kids would say, in the Middle Ages, "What language did they speak?" And I said, "Well, they spoke Latin."
And
And
so
they go, "Could you speak Latin?" "Yes." "Suscipiat Domini sacrificium de manibus tuis."
That's so good. So as an altar boy in training, did you study Latin formally, or did you just sort of pick it up with the job?
No, when we were altar boys, we just learned by rote,
Right.
just to spit it out at the altar in response to the priest. But I did study Latin in high school. I had 2 years of Latin.
Okay.
Gallia et debita entre patens.
I like the faces you make when you speak Latin. So you studied in high school. Was there any thought ever of joining the clergy?
Yes, I did. The teachers left a great impression on me, and
Right.
I thought about it. But also, I started dating, and so that vocation went bye-bye.
There's you could always be a Methodist or something.
No, that would have been a mortal sin.
Yeah. And so your folks, I'm guessing, were fairly Catholic,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
leads to the next question: how many siblings did you have?
I have 3 older brothers.
Okay.
I'm the youngest of 4. I'm 4 in the family, and in 1949, I was the birthday gift to my older twin brothers. I was born on their birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What
So
a gift.
here's this family, and 3 of their 4 kids share a birthday.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And are your brothers still here with us?
Yes, I have an older brother who lives down in Florida, and the twins, John and James, one lives in the Bronx still, and one lives out in Long Island.
Right.
Yeah.
How sweet. And how often do you get to see them?
I see the twins often.
The twins.
Yeah,
I
the
love
twins,
that you call
yeah.
them the twins.
They love coming up because my hobby is I cook, and so they love coming up for dinner.
And what's the number one meal they request of you?
Hamburgers.
Hamburgers?
Hamburgers, potato salad, macaroni salad, hot dogs with sauerkraut. Yeah.
Well, how do you prepare your hamburgers that makes them so desirable?
Well, nothing frozen, and usually I sound like a snoot with this, but I'll go up to Smokehouse of the Catskills and get ground chuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Did they just close down or something?
No, they did. All these rumors were out there, and
Yeah.
my goodness, say it ain't so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, they're open.
Oh, good. Same place? The
Same place.
used to be the veteran pork store?
Yeah, and the same staff.
Sweet.
Yeah, so.
I wonder why that rumor would make its way
Well,
around. And
they new owners. The original owners retired, and new owners bought the place. So the word got out that it's closed.
Right.
So no, it's not.
I love that the new owners kept the same staff.
Yeah,
So you make your trip over there,
that pilgrimage.
a pilgrimage, to get the burger when people come to visit.
Yeah.
And so the twins, did they come up to your place?
Yes, they like coming up here. I mean, I think they're 82 now, but they still love driving, coming up.
That's so nice. And how many kids do you have?
My wife and I have 2 daughters.
2 daughters.
Yeah, Leah, who was born in 1979, and Rachel, born in 1971.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So you get this good beef from the Smokehouse of the Catskills. What else? How else do you prepare it to make the perfect burger?
Just salt and pepper. Nothing
That's it.
fancy. No additives, no marinade, none of that stuff.
And do you broil it or fry it or cook it on a grill?
Cook it on a grill.
Uh-huh.
Cook it on a grill, yes. But of course, there's sauteed onions and mushroom that you could put on. And
Right.
I put on crumbled blue cheese on top with
A gas grill or a charcoal grill?
gas grill.
I love that idea. And any special potato salad secrets?
My wife loves when I make the potato salad. No great secrets. It's I look at recipes, and what I do is I read what people review, how they review it, and what they'll say.
Right.
And they'll say, "Don't add that. You could add this comment. No, add this.
Oh, right. The comment section of
condiment to it." So, yeah, That's what I'll make, in macaroni salad.
That's nice. What are you making tonight?
No, on Friday it's the 11th commandment. I shall not cook.
Oh, really? And do you cook most of the other days?
Yeah.
And did you cook for your kids when they were growing up?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I loved cooking, and then my wife was a teacher, and she taught in Red Hook. So she liked to stay after school and, do all her classwork and prep for the next day. And both of our girls went to Rhinebeck school system. Matter of fact, I had them when they were in high school.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they would raise their hand, Dad, Mr. Donaldson.
Did they call you Dad in class?
Yeah, I didn't care.
Might as well. Everybody knew, I'm sure.
But so I could get home like about 5 o'clock or 4:30, and I could cook dinner. And so my wife could get home at 5:45, and dinner would be ready.
So how was it having these kids in your class? Was it history class or law?
History and law. I did teach a whole plethora of history courses there, but starting around 1988, I became interested in teaching law because seniors had to take a half a year of government. So I contacted the state ed department and said, well, could I teach law instead of government? They asked, well, send up a course outline, which I did, and they approved it. So that's what I started doing, and it evolved into a program. And a program that by the 1994, I had 28 lawyers, law enforcement, people coming in as guest lecturers on the different area of law that I'd be teaching.
Oh, that's great. And how many students went on to those kinds of jobs?
A number of students have entered law because one of the activities I did was the mock trial team.
Oh, right.
And the nice thing was that you would get a case from the New York State Bar Association, and it would be all the information in the case, and then you would get affidavits for 3 plaintiff witnesses and 3 affidavits for the defense witnesses, depending whether it was a civil or a criminal case. And the kids had to be familiar with substantive and procedural law. So we would rehearse, we'd practice. I would go back to school at night. The kids would come over at nighttime, and he would go into Dutchess County Court, where we had actual judges, presiding over the case. And so the kids had to learn how to dress. Right? I mean, girls wore skirts, guys wore jackets and ties.
Right.
And they had to learn all the objections. You were limited to like maybe 10 objections.
Really? I had no idea there was a limit.
But I taught them 16. I used to go to court trials. I studied litigation by watching the trials and learning all the tricks that lawyers did.
Right.
So,
and plus there was probably Perry Mason.
Perry Mason is a show. All these shows you see on television, with the lawyers, the trial was maybe 5-10 minutes, and the lawyers are all dynamic and they woo the jury. I mean, you go to the county court, Dutchess Supreme Court, and you watch a civil case, or sometimes you go to the county court and watch a criminal case. There are good lawyers. There's some dynamic lawyers, and there are a lot of lawyers who should have studied some acting. They might know the law, but their skills before a jury were somewhat poor. I mean, looking at notes, hesitating, and no.
And were there any lawyers that you were like, oh, that guy's or that woman is trying a case, I want to be there to watch them? Were you a fanboy of any lawyers?
There was one attorney on the district attorney's office. His name was Ed Whitesell, and he was a dynamic litigator. He was very good in the courtroom. You also had a local attorney, Steve Melly, who was a dynamic trial attorney.
Right.
And I watched Steve in court.
He's still around. He's still practicing law, right?
Yeah. And so what I learned by observing in the lawyers, I imparted to my students, like how to waltz the courtroom.
Have a what?
How to waltz the courtroom.
Right.
Going before the judge, going over to the witness, leaning back over to
to waltz the courtroom.
Yeah, so we call it. Like I had this one student, Allison Scraw. Her parents still live here. I think Allison might be back in the area. She did a criminal case before Judge Tommy Dolan. And she was doing the opening statement for the prosecution. And, of course, they opened first. The defense opened second. She gets up before the case. I mean, she knew her stuff. And she said, I'm going to do it without notes. I said, no. Have your notes in your hand when you start. And once you've hooked the judge and hooked the other people in the courtroom, lay down your notes if you feel good enough to do it. So she did. She got up.
Why was that your advice?
Because I didn't want her, it was her first trial. I didn't want her to lose her train of thought and not have her notes available.
Right.
I wanted her to feel that she had hooked everybody was watching her, and she felt confident to say, I can do it without the notes. And she did. And she dropped her notes and just wooed. Even the stenographer was watching her.
I love that.
And in the end of the trial, well, I tell the story is, at the end of the trial, she came up and she said, Mr. Donaldson, this is what I want to do in life.
And
she is a top litigator in a prestigious law firm out of Philadelphia.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So, geez, what was I going to say? So she went on to be a litigator, and I'm guessing many of your other students did. Have you gone to see any of them in action in court?
No, because they're all out of the area.
Right.
I mean, some are out in California, but there is one of my students on the mock trial team who went to Harvard, went into the Navy after Harvard, spent 8 years or 12 years in the Navy, retired as a lieutenant commander, came back and said, okay, I'm going to law school. Just graduated from NYU law school. So one of my requests is when you do your first trial, I want to come down and sit in the back room.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So did you ever consider becoming a lawyer yourself?
Back in the 90s, one of the local attorneys who was family court judge now, Jeff Martin, wanted me to go to law school. And law school would have been just 1 year. Then I would have clerked with him for, I think, 3 years or 2 years. I'd clerk with him. And then I'd be eligible to take the bar exam. But had I done so, my wife would have divorced me.
Had you done so what?
Had I done so, my wife would have divorced me.
Oh, no.
Said enough of this nonsense.
Yeah, but being a lawyer is not a bad job, and you can really serve your community and your people. And
yeah, I felt I was doing that as a teacher,
right?
Because I enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed teaching. I used to tell the kids in the classroom, I said, you want to find an occupation that you like doing. I said, I wake up in the morning. I enjoy coming to work.
Yeah.
How many people can say that?
And so, how did you become interested in being a teacher?
It was in my blood. It was in the DNA.
Really?
All my Irish ancestors were teachers.
Yeah.
So it's predestined.
That's funny. And so you went to, you got a teaching certificate at Marist?
No. The certificate is your certification.
Okay.
So after, what was it, 2 years of teaching, I forget, it was over 50 years ago. After I had all the courses, and then once I taught for 1 year, I received my certification in social studies, 7 through 12. But also teaching at Holy Cross, we dealt with a lot of special education with the kids. So the state came down in 1978 and certified us in special education, K through 12. Oh. So I had dual certification, social studies and special education.
And Holy Cross, the Rhine Cliff Free Union, or Union Free
School. Yeah.
I'm not going to get that right. Did it serve? It served a whole bunch of special needs kids. Was it known for that?
Yeah, most of our kids were from New York City. I mean, we went through the whole gamut of gang kids, heroin, psychedelic drugs. We had the different groups there. It was tough, but the kids weren't bad, really. I mean, I enjoyed it. I stayed there for 10 years, and why did I leave? An opening in Rhinebeck, and so I decided for the goof to submit my resume.
Right.
I mean, we were living down in New Hamburg at the time, and we were living on one income, one check. And so I went over, I saw Superintendent Jim Saylor, the old superintendent of Rhinebeck District, and I met the principal of the high school, and they interviewed me, and bingo, I got the job.
Wow.
Well, I found out later because I did a presentation on Japanese education, because in 1981, I spent the summer at Harvard University with about 20 other teachers. We studied Japanese culture.
Wow.
So we were immersed in the culture. And so I did a presentation, and the principal who attended the presentation said, we won.
Now, was that an expected part of the interview, to do a presentation on something?
No. Oh, no. They just knew about me.
I see. You'd done that earlier.
Yes.
And what can you tell me about the Japanese educational system?
Hai wakarimasu.
You what?
Yes, I understand. Hai wakarimasu.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, back in the 1980s, Japanese education was rigorous. I mean, some people might consider parochial education rigorous. Years ago, Japanese, you were in class from 8 o'clock in the morning to maybe 5 o'clock in the evening. You would go home and you would have a bite to eat. The mother would prepare a dinner for you. Because your father was still at work, it was customary for Japanese fathers to stay at work until the boss went home, which could be 9, 10, or 11 o'clock. And so then the kids would go back to night school because everything depended upon their final examination to get into college.
Right.
And your score on the examination would determine what college you would attend in Japan.
Right.
So everything was focused on the testing madness.
Right.
And so although, I mean, the Japanese students could easily memorize and learn stuff, did they know how to think, I would ask? No. American students knew how to think.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And
So-
can you give an example of that?
I can give you an example of history.
I mean, it sounds like creative problem solving when you say
Well, I'll give
knowing
you an
how to
example.
think.
Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Most of the Japanese military, especially under General Hideki Tojo, said, yes, this is our way of doing it. It was a brilliant plan. But they didn't realize the ramifications of the attack. One person did, all right, Admiral Yamamoto. He knew, said, don't do it, because the United States is a powerful country, and they'll come back and they'll defeat us.
Right.
But because he was obedient to the emperor, he did not dissent from the rest. However, the attack had to be a surprise, all right? Well, they were supposed to, I'm sorry, I'm going to get into the system stuff here.
Oh, that's
They
all
were
right.
supposed to deliver the declaration of war. The planes arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning, I think, over Pearl Harbor base.
Right.
The Japanese ambassador in Washington, now how many hours is that? That might be 12 o'clock in the afternoon. 'Cause
Yeah.
all right. They were supposed to deliver the declaration of war ahead of time, so it wouldn't be a surprise attack. We told you. Except that the message came in code. It was a Sunday. The secretaries were off. The ambassadors had to decipher the code and then type it up with their fingers. All right? And by the time they got to the Secretary of Defense or whomever they had to give it to, the Japanese had already attacked. They were too late. So when Yamamoto heard that the Japanese were late in delivering the declaration of war, he said, we have awoken a sleeping bear.
Right.
Now, why was Yamamoto knowledgeable about this? Because he studied at Harvard.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah.
Which is where you studied the Japanese
Still
educational system. And have you been to Pearl Harbor?
No.
Japan?
Yeah, no. But it was a great program. I mean, we were in class from 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes to 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
Yeah, and we had the best of the best. I mean, we had a session with Edwin O. Reischauer, the former ambassador to Japan under the Kennedy administration. We met in his library while he pontificated as his wife poured sherry going around the room.
That sounds nice.
It was.
So you're teaching history in Rhinebeck. And what year did you start?
Rhinebeck?
Yeah.
1981. It was 1981 I came over there.
And
Yeah.
you taught there for how many decades?
Oh, I was there from 1981 to 2004.
Right.
And why did I leave in 2004? Because I was Tier 1 teacher.
You were what?
Tier 1 in the New York State teacher retirement system. I was eligible to retire at 55.
Wow.
So I did. But I continued teaching at Dutchess. I was also an adjunct at Dutchess.
Oh, at DCC?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. And you're teaching history there as well?
No, I taught introduction to law and legal research.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What fun.
It was.
So at some point in there, you became interested in bluestone.
Oh, how'd you find out about
What
that?
the heck? That seems like kind of a swerve for a kid from the Bronx. Though
Yeah.
though maybe the sidewalks down there were paved with bluestone.
They weren't paved in gold, that's for certain.
Yeah.
Reason why I got interested in bluestone is because my father's family, my father was a Donaldson, and his mother was a Steins. And he didn't know a whole lot about them. He knew that they lived in the old town of Kingston over in Ulster County. And his mother grew up in Stony Hollow. And he said they knew about, they were bluestone quarry owners. And so I started, exploring the family genealogy of my father. This is before you had Ancestry.com,
right,
newspapers.com. So my fatal day was I went into the old town of Kingston Town Hall, which was located in the old one-room schoolhouse. And I went to the clerks and I said, I'm looking for information on William Donaldson, my grandfather, and I think he died around 1909. And they said, yeah, I think we got something here. And they pulled out an old ledger, leather-bound ledger, and they opened it up. And they found my great-grandfather. And so they said, so your family's from the area? And I said, yeah, and the Steins and everything. And I said, we had an old town historian, Harry Simpson. He had a lot of stuff. It's in the back storeroom. No one ever goes in there. Would you like to take a look at it? I said, sure. All right. Bad move. Went to the back room, opened up the door. There were folders and documents and tubs filled with stuff. I said, it was chaos, organized chaos. I said, I'd really like to look at it. And they said, well, you can come back and look at it. So I did. I spent
the whole chaos, but it wasn't daunting. No. It was. I'm guessing it was the opposite. It was probably alluring to some people.
What he had done was he tried to find articles in the Kingston Freeman about Stony Hollow and Jockey Hill. And I had spoken to people about it, and they said, oh, Jockey Hill, Irish riff lived there. They were rabble-rousers, boozers, etc. All negative talk.
Right.
So I saw what Harry Simpson was trying to do, and I said, I'm going to continue it. So for the next 13 years, I sat in the City of Kingston Library going through all the old newspapers on the microfiche machine, finding any articles about Stony Hollow, Jockey Hill.
And where is Stony Hollow?
Stony Hollow, if you're going up 28.
Yeah.
And you come to, it used to be the Doll House on the left. There was a big structure there. You can't make a left turn, but if you go up to the top of the hill, there's a barbecue place.
You make a left turn there.
Make a left turn and you go down and you're in Stony Hollow.
Oh.
There's not much left of it.
Interesting.
But one time it was a thriving bluestone quarry town.
And Jockey Hill's like across the street.
Jockey Hill's across the street, back a little bit up the hill.
Right.
They had the worst reputations, according to the Kingston Freeman. All right. The Kingston Freeman was a Republican newspaper. The Irish up on Jockey Hill and Stony Hollow were members of the Democratic Party. So it was yellow journalism. I mean, they, anything, they could say negative about the Irish, they did.
Right. Isn't that
and
funny?
I was able to show that. Like they would say that, in the election of 1876, so many people from St. Mary's Cemetery, those Irish people, came out of the graves and they voted. Well, I got all the registration and the voting list from the Ulster County archives. Not one interred person from St. Mary's Cemetery voted. So it was all lies. It was fake news.
Fake news. Yeah, interesting that that doesn't seem to have gone away, that ploy.
No. So it became an obsession, and I started typing it up. I transcribed all the articles and stories and created a 950-page anthology called Chronicles of Ulster.
Okay. But is that the whole title?
Yes, Chronicles of Ulster, Volume 1, Volume 2.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, online, on Amazon or wherever I found it. There's more. It says a topical and chronological anthology of the bluestone trade in Ulster County, New York, and the history of the town, Kingston, from newspapers and PR articles.
Yeah.
So what were you looking for when you're pouring through all this stuff?
Well, Volume 1 focuses on the bluestone trade.
Uh-huh.
There's really nothing out there on the bluestone trade. If you could get different books about the Hudson River, and you'll find I can't think of his name right now, but they will mention the bluestone, but minimal amounts. Do you have a definitive book on bluestone? No. So that's what I decided to do, was taking all the newspaper articles, people I interviewed, journals about the bluestone industry and photographs, and put it all together, and that's volume 1. Volume 2 deals with the history of the town of Kingston and all of the misconceptions and misnews and, flagrant, negative stories about the Irish.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. So when you started the research, you just sort of looking in general, looking at genealogy and history of the Irish around here.
Yep.
And then at some point, this splinter story, Bluestone, presented itself.
Yeah.
And you followed that.
Yep.
And are you a Mason? Have you worked with Bluestone?
No. But one of the interesting things I enjoyed doing besides the library, I walked Jockey Hill, going through the old bluestone quarries, climbing down into them, and
Oh, wow.
And I found the remains of the where my ancestors, the Donaldsons, lived by studying maps at the time, and I was able to find the coordinates, and I went and I was able to find it, and did have a run-in with the big black bear one day who was looking at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sniffed at me and walked away. My wife said, "You're never going up there again."
I did it. Your wife. And did she accompany you on
Yes,
that?
I took her up there one time, and my daughter, who, is a history professor, but I don't think they were as interested as I was, and so
Right.
Yeah.
And where is your daughter a history professor?
She got her PhD from Vanderbilt University, and she was a professor at the College of Charleston,
Wow.
and got tired of the politics, what was happening in South Carolina.
Many people in academia do get tired of politics. But I would think especially if you're a history professor down south.
So she loved Baltimore, so she was lured back to Baltimore, where she became the one of the curators to the Museum of Industry of Baltimore. And then after 4 years there, the city of Baltimore kind of kidnapped her, and she's now the historical preservationist for the city of Baltimore.
It sounds like a great gig.
Yeah, she loves it. She's a history buff.
You must be so proud to have one of the kids sort of like...
Proud of both of my daughters. The other daughter is the executive director of fundraising for the Charleston Library System.
Oh, how did they both end up down south?
Our oldest was the first to go down there and loved Charleston. She was tired of living in Brooklyn, and she was involved in nonprofit, and that's what she worked at down there.
Right.
And then Rachel got a teaching job at the College of Charleston, so they landed up owning houses 6 blocks away from each other.
Love that.
Yeah.
And do they see each other often?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
That must make you just so happy.
We're very proud of them.
When I see my kids getting along well and just loving each other, hardly anything makes me happier.
Yeah.
Because, I want, I told my daughters, they were the first 2 born, one time, they were fighting, and I said, hey, listen, you need to get along, because someday, like, mommy and daddy won't be here. It'll just be you two. And they burst into tears. You're like, what do you mean? And my wife said, wow, great moments in parenting. I don't know what you were thinking. But, they shouldn't have said it, but the thought of, like, the kids going on and enduring and loving each other and carrying on the love of the family is really attractive.
Yeah. So, it's funny. Who's going to take care of us when we really get old? And my wife and I are wondering about that, because our oldest daughter, I don't know if I could live with her, because she won't let me walk around supermarkets. All right.
Oh, she won't?
Dad, you got to stay right here. And
that's funny.
Yeah. And the other one, Rachel. Well, I think if she brought us to the mall 2 weeks later, Leah would call her and say, how's mom and dad? Oh, I left them at the mall.
Oh, God. That's funny. Yeah, my oldest child, my oldest daughter, tends to sort of like, grab me by the elbow and like guide me out of the way of danger and stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's nice.
It's really sweet. And my son's like, come on, I'm going to kick your ass at tennis. Like a completely different conception of who I am physically in this world. But it's so loving that she wants to take care of me. But I'm like, that's a little premature, darling. Yeah. But she evidently doesn't think it is. So you started looking into the bluestone. And I got to ask, I'm sure you've been to Opus 40 over there.
Yes.
Which is that all bluestone?
Yes, mostly all the bluestone works, yeah. But I wasn't really interested in the artwork and the creation of the bluestone. I was
Right.
more interested in the old stone quarries and the
Right.
stories that came from them. So
And how many quarries? You said you walked across Jockey Hill, which goes from 28 over to Sawkill,
Yeah.
I think, and
Um,
over a hill. How many quarries do you reckon they had?
that's a good question. I really didn't keep count. I know there were 3 distinct quarries that I did climb down into and walked around, but they were abandoned. They had used up whatever stone that was they could find at the time.
Right.
There isn't a stone quarry up there up on Jockey Hill Road that's still in operation,
Huh.
because while I was out in the woods, sometimes I could hear the dynamite exploding. Yep.
And why how did it come to pass that part of the state, or that part of the region, that would be so chock-block full with bluestone?
Well, I'm going to have to ask that, what took place in the geological ages after the last ice age, whatever, the Earth did in its movement and its changes landed up of huge bluestone beds. But by the 1840s, all right, cities were expanding, like New York City was expanding,
Right.
and they needed sidewalks, and suddenly you found a stone that was great as a sidewalk for sidewalk purposes,
Right.
or for decorating their homes. And so there was now a demand for bluestone.
And what made it so great for sidewalks?
Oh, because it was a non-slippery surface, all right, and it wouldn't hold water. If you had water draining off, it would dry quickly. And it was appealing. I mean, they would plane it smooth,
Right.
all right? And so you had a nice sidewalk. You go up to Rhinebeck, you can still see some of the bluestone here. Warren Street in Hudson still
Right.
has the bluestone, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in front of
They
my in front of my
last.
house in Rhinebeck, there's bluestone.
Yeah. That might have come from the other side of the river there.
Right. Were there quarries over here?
I think there were, but not as much as up in the town of Kingston. I mean, we're talking the heyday of 1872 up to about 1900. That would have been it.
Right.
Portland Cement did it in, and many of the quarries were depleted of their stone, and
Right.
Portland Cement was cheaper, and there were new sources for that.
And there were cement factories
Yes.
around there as well on the Hudson River.
Yep.
And why were they there?
That I don't know, because I
Yeah,
didn't
me
study
neither.
that.
It's just curious.
Didn't study that, just focused on bluestone. I mean, after a while, there was demand for brick, and so you have your brick yards over in Kingston. And what's the town? Oh, it was Port Ewan or somewhere around there where cement was being manufactured.
Right.
If you walk up the roundabout from the restaurant right down there, roundabout, there's a street that goes up. I think it's a Beale Street.
Beale, yeah.
Yeah. You can see some of the kilns, all right, embedded
brick-
in the
from the
stone.
brick factories.
Yeah, from the brick factories. The kilns are still there. Yeah.
Right. So do you have bluestone around your house?
No, no. But the finest bluestone I ever saw was around the old Morton Schoolhouse. Are you familiar with the Morton Schoolhouse down
Yeah.
at the end Morton Road there? Yeah, I used to be on the Conservation Advisory Board for the town, and
Right.
the previous owner wanted to do something with it, and I had to go there for a site visit, and I just marveled at all the bluestone around. So in my report, I asked the owner, please do not get rid of the bluestone. Take it out, do what you want with the house, but put the bluestone back. And he thanked me for that, and he did.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
nice.
so
And where exactly is that?
the Morton Schoolhouse, all right, if you go down Morton Road and you come up to the intersection of
Oh,
Mill
right.
Road,
Right
there on the left, that was
Yes.
the Morton Schoolhouse.
It's a beautiful building.
It is. Yeah.
I've never been in there to notice the bluestone.
Well, the bluestone is all around the house
Okay.
and the lawn. Yeah.
What a treat. And where is your place?
I live down on Mill Road, all right, about halfway between the Morton Schoolhouse and Route 9.
Okay. And did you move there shortly after landing the job in Rhinebeck High?
Rhinebeck High, I was in 81, and then in 1986, we moved up here.
Okay.
Yeah. We used to live down in New Hamburg.
Right. Where is that?
New Hamburg is south of Poughkeepsie. It's the first train stop after Poughkeepsie.
Oh, right.
The nice thing about New Hamburg
That's funny.
was the railroad line, the Hudson line, is inland. So we had access to the Hudson River. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it can be hard to get to up and down the tracks here.
Yep. I said that in Red Hook.
What's that? I've read it. Yeah. And so you moved from New Hamburg up here.
Yep.
And
Well, it was close to work. I mean, it was
right.
26 miles. I would commute,
Why did it
one
take-
way each day and 26 miles back. And so
why did it take you so long to make the move?
money. We were
Oh.
living on one income. So
But you said your wife's a teacher as well.
she is now, yes. Once we were settled up here and the girls were now in elementary school, my wife returned to teaching. She taught in Red Hook.
Okay. And how did she like that? Is she still working? Or
No. Mel's retired. Yeah.
And
She loved elementary school teaching. She was a natural.
Right.
Yeah.
How sweet. And so you said you retired at 55.
Well, from the high school, I still continued teaching at Dutchess till 2010.
Oh, okay. So that's not that long ago.
No.
And then you retired. Did you have some idea what you were going to do with your retirement?
Not really. Well, I was doing the anthology, so that occupied a lot of my time. And once the anthology was done, I became a volunteer at the Public Defender's Office. I did intake there.
Oh, sweet.
At the time, Tom Angel was the public defender, and Tom was one of the lecturers in my law program. So
Wow.
I said to Tom one day, I saw him, I said, "You ever take volunteers?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I became an intake specialist. Or actually, they didn't know what to title me, so I became an intern. So I was the oldest intern in Dutchess County.
I love that. I think there was a movie where Robert De Niro plays like an old intern in
Yeah? Okay.
some young media company or something.
Yeah.
So from the time you started teaching here, I guess, until now, what were some of the major changes that you've seen in Rhinebeck?
Wow. Yeah, I was trying to think of that on the way over because I think you mentioned something about
Let me
that
rephrase.
before.
What changes, if any, do you complain about to your wife? Gosh darn it, give it back.
No,
Or is
I
that
don't want
just-
to go down that road.
Or is that just me who's
Well,
complaining?
Let me give you a story. When I came up here to teach at Holy Cross, I didn't have an apartment, didn't have a car. So I found a place to live at the Rhinecliff Hotel. And so I lived down the street from here.
Right.
And it was an interesting experience. It was just a place to stay. And Rhinecliff was a town that was kind of dead. I mean, there were empty homes. There was nothing going on. On certain nights when I wasn't going to when I wasn't in class at New Paltz, I used to go up to the library and sit with Mrs. Ziegelbreyer, the librarian. We were the only two there.
Here at the Morton Library?
Yeah, Mrs. Ziegelbreyer.
Nice.
And, and she would tell me all the dirt about Rhinecliff in the past and stuff like that. The only, across the street from the library, that rectangular building, it's one level, that used to be Conklin's grocery store.
Uh-huh.
You could go in and buy a can of ravioli and
A can of ravioli,
and,
which for a single guy was probably a...
gourmet.
Yeah.
There was really not much going on. Rhinecliff used to be a hopping town when the ferry was here. I think Betty Williams down at the hotel said there were like about 9 or 10 different bars. And it was a
Wow.
hopping place. Once the bridge opened, kaput, that was it.
Really?
Yeah.
And where did the ferry put in?
Right at the where the boat landing is.
Right down there?
Yeah, right around
In
there.
Rhinecliff, at the boat launch.
Was where the ferry landed.
And how many ferries did they have?
They had one. I think it was called the Skittle boat. The Skittle boat ferry, yeah.
Steelboat Ferry.
Skittle.
Skittle.
Yep.
Why? Any idea?
I don't know.
That was a funny name.
But I forget what it was, but you could get over to Kingston and get back over here. And so people used it. And of course, talking with old timers here, the Coast Guard didn't break up the ice during the wintertime, so the Hudson froze over. So sometimes they would drive their cars over to Kingston, to the roundout, put chains on their wheels and drive over.
Yes. When did they start breaking up the ice?
I don't know, but I used to watch the cutters back in '72 when I came to Saugerties Coast Guard Station. They would send the cutters up just to break up the ice to keep an open channel for the oil barges to get up to Albany.
Right. Yeah, I wonder when that started.
I don't know.
This winter, and then, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, the ice boats were out,
Yeah.
which is really a sight to see.
Yeah.
And did you ever have any interest in piloting an ice boat?
No. No. The longest boat I ever piloted was a 44 rescue boat, 44-foot rescue boat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty big boat.
Yeah, it is.
And what kinds of rescues were you involved in?
Mostly down in New York Harbor,
Okay.
Jamaica Bay.
Were you stationed up here?
At the Saugerties Coast Guard Station, I was a radio operator there.
Oh, okay.
But down in Rockaway or Atlantic Beach, I was at a rescue station, search and rescue station, and so we would go out for boats that were the engines died or people were in the water or missing. We would have to respond to the scene and do a search pattern or try to do a recovery pattern if that was necessitated. Yeah.
Right.
I mentioned before a funny story about, we would get calls. And the radio, of course, was, you could hear it all over the base. Whatever calls were coming in, you could hear it because if it was a Mayday call, you could immediately run to your boat and get everything ready to go. And we got this call, help, my out here, the engine won't start. So the first question is, where is your location? I'm on the water. Okay, let's start. Are you on the bay side or the ocean side? I don't know.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And were you ever on a boat in the Hudson River with the Coast Guard?
Small boats.
Right.
Small boats, just patrol boats, nothing big.
Patrolling for what?
Just going down, seeing if anybody need help, helping the Ulster County Sheriff's Department or the Dutchess County Sheriff's Department.
Did they have their own boats?
Yes, they used to have their own boats. So most of the time it was just towing people back to their marina because their engines died. Yeah.
Right. And so do they still have their own boats, the sheriffs?
I believe they do, yeah.
Right. Huh. And are you out on the river ever? Are you a water person?
No. Walk around stone quarries.
That's so good. And so when you joined the Coast Guard to get out of the draft, was there any hassle? Did anybody give you any flack about that?
No.
It was just a done deal. You no longer were on the rolls
No.
of the selective service to get called up for
I was
duty.
doing my bit. So
Right.
And so when I was in boot camp, I was 22 years old. I was the oldest person in the company I was in. So.
And at 22, were people still getting called up?
Oh yeah.
I remember that draft. It was teenagers. It was kids getting sent to Vietnam.
They're infantry. It comes from French, infants.
Oh, I never connected that or even considered.
We almost landed up going to Vietnam because being a coxswain on a small boat, they used to have they were later called swift boats on the Mekong River and elsewhere, and they needed coxswains. So at one point we were told we might be going over there, and so
Okay.
Okay.
You seem sort of okay with that now, but at the time, evidently.
Well, boot camp is an interesting trip because they take away your ability to think on your own. You just respond to orders, and they drill that into you.
Right.
24/7. And so I knew they got me one day when I was watching people marching, and I said, oh, they're bouncing. I said, oh, they got me. I'm not allowed to think, but I'm responding to the way you should act.
Right.
Yeah. So
amazing. That must have been a strange moment to realize that the indoctrination had been successful, or the brainwashing, or whatever you want to call it.
Temporarily.
Right. But even just for a while, to see your brain, taking that bait.
Well, I mean, even afterwards when I served, I never really got the uniform correct. I mean, my hair was still touching my ears, and I wasn't very keen on the regulations, but I knew how to do the work.
Right.
So they would allow me to, work on my own. Like I used to visit oil facilities on the Hudson, and I would show up with a pea coat, Coast Guard baseball cap, and I would say Coast Guard. And the greatest thing was I had power. I could board ships without a search warrant.
Right.
And so they would look at me and say, you're really the Coast Guard? I go, yeah. I'd show them my folder, with my picture on it.
Right.
And he said, yeah. And I could go on the vessel and explore the vessel to make sure they were not violating, United States code as far as, having preventative measures to prevent an oil spill.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. And so as a young man, that must have been a little bit fun to have that kind of power.
I have to tell you a story. I'm up at Albany, and I'm standing on a pier, and it was the
How old were you at this point?
maybe about 26.
Uh-huh.
And the Chiquita banana boat was there. They actually had the Chiquita banana boat that used to come up the Hudson River. So I'm looking at the stern, and this guy is there drinking a Heineken beer, and he throws the bottle into the Hudson. I went ballistic. Ran to the gangplank, went up to the quarterdeck, got the officer of the day there, and I said, get that guy now. All right, I'm in uniform. And I said, he threw a bottle of, an empty beer bottle into my river. So I got the guy down. We walked along the pier, and finally he got a long pole with a net on it and got the bottle out of the Hudson. And I gave him a stern lecture, don't you pollute my river.
I love that. And so, later on, I'm just thinking about being a teacher. I mean, you've got a lot of power in that role.
No, I never thought I had power.
You didn't feel it.
No.
But in, now, years later, in the abstract, you must see that, in the power structure of the classroom, the teachers have the power, and I could be wrong.
Yeah, there were some teachers who exerted their authority.
Right.
I never saw myself as an authority picture. I think if you asked me to paint a picture of me in the classroom, you would not be able to identify me. I mean, I was strict with kids with homework, and I wouldn't tolerate any misbehaving. But most of the time, the kids didn't misbehave, or if they did misbehave, I just laugh at them. I never gave detention.
Right.
Right. But also because I taught law, a lot of kids came to me with legal issues.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so like they could have a problem in another class where a teacher gave them, infinity of detentions, and so for doing something, and they would say, "Is it legal?" And so I would, examine the facts, and I would go, "Yeah, it's legal, all right." But there was a couple of cases where kids came to me. I had to go to the teacher and say, "It's not legal." So I didn't go to the administration. I went to the teacher.
Right.
Like for instance, do kids have to stand for the pledge? That was a big thing, for the Pledge of Allegiance. No, they didn't. But you would get some teachers who would say, in my classroom, you are going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
Right? And some kids would finally say no. And so they would get detention or something like that. So they came to me, and I had to go to the teacher saying, no, they don't have to stand. Right? They don't have to say it. But they can't fool around. They can't do anything that would disrupt what the rest of the class was doing, saying the pledge. I mean, I said the pledge, right? But for other teachers, they had to learn that, no, they do have rights. Like, can kids wear baseball caps in the classroom?
Right.
No. All right? Courts rule, no. But out in the hallway, kids could, wear baseball caps.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you were a kid in school, did you get in any trouble?
Me? Yeah, I did. All right. And now it's going into religion. Of being raised a Catholic, we were not allowed to eat meat on Friday.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So finally, I think when I was a junior, one day at the apartment, I'm making lunch, and I said, I don't want a cream cheese and jelly sandwich. I want a ham sandwich. So I made myself a ham sandwich on Friday. And I'm in the cafeteria, and I'm eating my sandwich, and one of the students, a friend of mine, looks over and goes, Bob, you're eating meat. I go, yeah. And he goes, it's Friday. I go, I know. And Brother Caligari came walking by and said, Donaldson, is that a ham sandwich? Yes, Brother Caligari. Right? Well, it's Friday. I go, I know. You're not allowed to eat meat. I don't care. Boom, right across my face.
Oh, jeez.
Knocked me off the chair on the floor.
Wow.
And got a week of detention.
Egads. And was that it? Were you scared straight, or did you continue to?
Yeah, I figured I wasn't. Well, he kept an eye out for me because I was, I guess, a radical. So.
Right. And what's the reason for no meat on Fridays?
There are a lot of different theories about that. Going back to the Middle Ages, fasting was part of the life experience for all the congregants, whether you're in Ireland or England before the Tudors, in France and Germany before the Reformation. It was also a way to promote fish. And so for the fishmongers, business was great on Friday. So
there you go. So it was just to keep the
I don't know for certain. That's what I heard.
Fishmongers
so.
in business.
Yeah.
Wow. So I wanted to ask another question about John Fletcher Kilgore, who you wrote about as well.
Yeah, John, he's an interesting person. I mean, he was born in the town of Kingston. He grew up with the bluestone trade. His father ran a teamster wagon. So as a young kid, he rode the teamster wagons down to the Roundout, which was the shipping area for all the bluestone. Then later got involved with operating a bluestone quarry, and he used his money to buy up other quarries. But he realized there was a future not in the town of Kingston, but in Port Jervis. So John Kilgore went to Port Jervis. They found, sufficient areas for bluestone quarrying, and he set up the bluestone quarrying system in Port Jervis.
Wow.
Yeah, he used to go...
Which is over towards the Delaware River?
Right on the Delaware River. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he led a prosperous life. Matter of fact, my great-grandfather, Martin Steins, his brother James Steins, was the chief foreman of John Kilgore's bluestone quarries down in Port Jervis. Yeah.
So in the course of researching bluestone in the area, you must have come upon many sort of interesting characters.
Yeah, there were some interesting characters. Probably the best story is the Cold Spring House. Now, where's the Cold Spring House? If you're going up 28 and you're approaching the Habitat for Humanity store,
right?
There's a right-hand turn there called Jockey Hill.
Yeah.
All right. You can go up only so far before the stones in the road, become so big that your four-wheel Bronco is not going to go over them.
Okay.
You're back on 28. You look across the street on your left. There's a white house.
Yeah.
And you can tell that sometimes there are single candles in the window. That's the Cold Spring House. And back in the heyday of the bluestone trade, all of the quarry workers up on Jockey Hill would come down to the bluestone quarry because that's where the company paymaster set up shop. So they would go into the Cold Spring House. On the pool table there, they would put the money down and they would have all the sheets of how many hours the workers did, and they would pay the workers. And once the workers were all paid, the grill over the bar and grill, went up, the bar was open, and now they could all drink.
Oh, that sounds like a pretty solid business strategy.
Well, unfortunately, many of the men lost their paycheck, spending their money at the bar. So
right.
But trying to think of her name. I don't know if she's still alive today. She owned the house and she raised her family there. I interviewed her one time. Flood. I forget her first name. The last name was Flood. She ran the house. She was a great raconteur. What story she told me about the place.
Goodness.
Showing me bullet holes in the wall when they had removed the wallpaper. Bullet holes are still in the wall.
And did you collect stories?
Yes,
like that?
it's in the book. It's in the anthology.
I'm going to check out the book. Well,
so the neatest thing was that it's haunted.
Oh, nice. Have you ever actually seen a ghost?
No. Oh, heard a ghost, but that's another story.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Oh, no. So we got to have you back to tell that story some other time. I want to hear that. It's super fascinating, the whole idea about ghosts, of course. Well, Bob Donaldson, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody have a great Friday and a fabulous weekend. Thanks to Matt Rosenberg and Patricia Wanda here at the Epicurean, and have a great weekend. Thanks again, Bob.